the French and Indian War. And this is actually the last PowerPoint before exam 1, so just be aware of that. You'll notice this is in chapter 4 up to Pontiac's Rebellion. Pontiac's Rebellion will start the first section on exam 2. So in 1754, we're going to see that French soldiers are going to overwhelm some Virginians who had started to build a fort at the forks of the Ohio River. Then the French soldiers would go on to make their own much larger fort. They then planned to oust Washington's troops who were just up the river. But in May of that year, basically Washington's men would kill or capture all but one member of a small French reconnaissance party. Now, because of this, the French are going to decide to teach these British colonists under Washington a lesson, and they would attack Washington at his encampment, and the following day Washington actually surrendered after about a quarter of his troops had been killed or wounded in action. This is the start of the French and Indian War. Now, because there's war literally on the doorstep of the American colonies or the British colonies, however you want to refer to them at this point in time, we're going to see some colonies are going to start calling for some sort of intercolonial union so that they can coordinate their defenses, levy taxes, as well as regulate like Indian affairs. So this plan is initially called the Albany Plan of Union. However, the colonies were basically too suspicious of each other and they rejected this plan. I mean, think back to the last war we were looking at when you have like New Englanders fighting and taking Louisburg, and at the same time colonists from New York trading with New France, the enemy. Now, when it comes to the Native Americans in this war, they basically had no choice but generally to side with the French. So when we call it the French and Indian War, make note, the French and the Indians are on the same side, generally speaking. There are some Indian allies on the British side as well, but generally speaking, when we're talking about like just the Native Americans, more of them tend to be on the French side in this conflict. What happens is the French allied Native Americans are going to actually attack the British backcountry all the way from Pennsylvania down to the Carolinas. Now, the one exception to this big group is the Iroquois, who are going, hey, we're still neutral, but it really doesn't matter anymore because the French and the British are at war. The thing is, this war goes on for about 2 years in America before it actually starts up in Europe in 1756. There, it's going to be known as the 7 Years' War. So when you look up the 7 Years' War and the French and Indian War, it's basically the same conflict, just in different areas of the globe. And in fact, you could say this was a world war because there's going to be fighting that goes on in the Caribbean, Africa, India, the Philippine Islands, North America, and in Europe. The thing is, there's really 2 phases of this war. The first is from 1754 through 58, and the second is from 58 to 60. Now, in the first phase, so 54 through 58, basically the French are going to enjoy a lot of successes with guerrilla warfare in particular. Fun little fact, guerrilla warfare is basically translated to small warfare when it's a French term. Basically, the French are going to rely on their native allies during this time, and they together are going to raid the English frontier settlements and kill and capture hundreds of British civilians and force many others to flee. This is basically a period of about 3 years of demoralization, as well as there's a lot of internal conflict in the British colonies as well. The thing is, Great Britain itself sent a new commander-in-chief over the soldiers, as well as some more trained soldiers under Lord Loudon. However, Lord Loudon is basically going to be a micromanager, and he insists on just managing every single aspect of the war effort, and he wanted to direct the campaigns and dictate the amount of support in both like men and money in which each colony is going to provide for the war effort. Colonial soldiers are going to object to a lot of this. And actually by the end of 1757, basically the colonial assemblies are refusing to cooperate with Lord Loudoun and the British authorities. A lot of this is because Britain really wanted this war to conform to European professional military standards. But very few colonial volunteers actually met that standard. Because they didn't meet the standard, a lot of times the British officers are going to assume that, oh, these colonial soldiers are lazy or they're cowards and we need to whip them into shape. Whereas the colonial soldiers oftentimes saw the British officers as like their brutal taskmasters. And it's needless because they need to be out on the front fighting to protect their family and friends and so on and so forth. The thing is, during this time period, while the French had a lot of success with guerrilla warfare tactics, we're gonna start seeing a change. The French are going to begin to move towards a more European style of warfare, and this basically destroys their strategic and tactical advantages. So why do they do this? A lot of this is because of their Native American allies. The thing is, while you might go, oh, the French have a pretty good relationship with the Native Americans, make no mistake, the French also saw Native Americans as savages. And so the French wanted to conform to more like European practices, like they would allow a defeated garrison to go home in return for saying that they would not fight again. But when they did this, the Native American allies to the French really felt betrayed because that wasn't their style of warfare. And so even when the French released a lot of like American colonist captives and stuff, Native American allies to the French would go ahead and like take captives and trophies and kill defenders and capture other people. And what this really does is it's twofold problematic for the French. On one hand, it alienates New Englanders and it outrages them because now they were told they could, return home unharmed, and they weren't allowed to. And so this really enrages a lot of American colonists. On the other hand, it also alienates the Native American allies of the French, and really they depended on them for the defense of Canada. Plus, as this is going on, the British finally begin to moderate their policies and basically reach accommodation with the colonists. A lot of friction had arose between the colonists and the British officials because the American colonists felt like they were bearing all the financial burdens of the war, but they didn't have really a say in how it was being fought. And so at this point, they're going to be promised reimbursement in regards and in proportion to their contribution to the war. Also, they're going to reduce the power of the commander-in-chief, and they actually replace Lord Loudoun. At this point, Great Britain is going to send thousands of British soldiers to America to fight. And now they start operating a lot more successfully. And so this is that second phase of the war, 1758 through 60 and such. Basically, they're going to do things like they're going to seize Louisburg again, and they cripple Canada's supply. They're going to have a supply shortage starting in 1758. Also, the British are going to manage to persuade the Indians to abandon their French alliance, partly because of this alienation that has been occurring over the first few years of the war. French defenders actually of some forts would have to, they'd be abandoned by their native allies and basically would end up having to like blow up their forts and retreat back to the Great Lakes. And then we get the Battle of Quebec. Malcolm, a French officer, is going to decide to risk everything in an open style European field battle. This is going to be the Battle of Quebec. He loses this gamble, and in fact, Malcolm is going to lose his life in the gamble. General Wolfe, who goes against him, you can see this on the arrow up at the top of your map on the right side. He was the leader of the British troops in this battle, and though he was victorious in battle, he actually did die in battle as well. But the French haven't lost the war yet. The outcome is really going to be decided more at the Battle of Quibecoin Bay in France in November of 1759. Plus, The Iroquois are going to decide in 1760 to drop their neutrality and join the Anglo-American side, or that's the British American side. We're going to see things like in sea battles, the French are going to be caught, they're going to lose their navy. This limits their ability to operate in the Atlantic. That means there's not going to be any more reinforcements coming over to New France. And basically the Iroquois taking the side of the British or the Americans is going to tip the balance irrevocably against the French. We'll see the last French defenders of Canada are going to surrender on September 8th of 1760. So, the war is eventually going to conclude with an uninterrupted series of victories across the globe. Great Britain has now won the French and Indian War. This conquest really brought about this unshakable conviction that the British armaments, they were invincible. And there's a huge surge of patriotism across the British Empire. Now, hostilities will end formally on February 10th of 1763 with the Treaty of Paris. Quick note, if you ever decide to Google search Treaty of Paris, make sure you got the right date. This is 1763. There's a ton of Treaty of Paris's. Historically, it has been a place where people have come together and basically concluded wars across like ages. So what does everyone get with this treaty? What does this war cause after? First of all, France is going to regain their West Indian sugar islands, but they're basically going to lose the rest of their North American empire. So you can see from pre-war boundaries 1754 versus after the war 1763 on the right side. Spain, they're going to have Cuba and the Philippines returned to them, but they are going to give up Florida. And Great Britain is going to now own everything east of the Mississippi River. So we got that boundary of the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up north to Hudson's Bay. So, as a part of your discussion for this week, I am asking you this question. What if? What if France had won the war? How might this have changed America's future? So what do you think might have happened if France won the war? Would we have gone on to the American Revolution? Would we not? Would we be part of France today? What things do you think could have happened if France had won this? Also, just quick things about your test, some helpful hints, plus part of your journal today is I want you to ask a question about the test or a question you have about anything in the notes. Come up with a question. Things that help you on the test. Something is better than nothing. Please don't leave blanks on your test. Caused. If I ask you something about what does this cause, make sure you explain what happened next or what happened after. Don't tell me this war caused a lot of people to die. No, that's what happened. Caused is after the war is over, basically. Watch clarity on your answers. If I can't understand you, you're not going to get full credit by any means. Don't use you, I, and my in academic writing unless I specifically ask for your opinion. If an opinion is asked of you, then give an opinion. Please be looking at your review. Please be studying. Please look at your rubric. If I put pushing as a note, especially like on quizzes, but also on tests, that basically means you're pushing it on your answers and you're not going to get credit next time. So just keep these things in mind and please let me know if you have any questions.